I think we should probably just start introductions, and then we can dive in. As people, I'm sure there'll be more people arriving. We've got some people on already. I'm sure there'll be people arriving in the next couple of minutes, so we'll dive in. So, hi everybody. I'm Andrew Garvey. I'm the chief exec of VIA Consulting, and we work with lots of accountants and software companies, basically looking to solve problems, really. Not just accountants, but also payroll companies, which is why we're running the webinar today. And on that note, I will introduce you to my co-hosts, and they can give a bit more of an introduction about themselves. So, Jenny, do you want to go first and introduce yourself?
Yep, Jenny Gillam. I am an accountant. I run an accountancy practice in Sussex, and I'm also co-founder of FreshPay. That's me.
Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Haynes. I also run a bookkeeping and payroll bureau, and I am also co-founder of FreshPay.
Nice. And last but by no means least, Nicola.
Hi, so yeah, I'm Nicola Hageman. I also run an accountancy practice based in Bedford, the Numbers Quarter, and again, I'm a co-founder of FreshPay. So yes, hello.
There's some good perspectives here, because you've sort of doing the do, and then you've built something to improve things, which I'm sure we'll come on to later. But obviously, the way the sort of format for today, I'll just ask some questions and we'll have a discussion, and really want to get some Q&A going as well. So I'll get the question and answer thing up here so we can go through that. But I think the more interactive we can make it, we'll sort of try and answer questions as we go along. If we don't, we'll either answer them at the end, or we'll try and deal with some stuff after the webinar's finished. So on that note, so first question I've got for you all, and Nicola, we'll probably start with you because you went last in your introductions. What are some common inefficiencies that you see in payroll businesses, and how can you, first of all, how can you identify those inefficiencies, and then what can you do to eliminate them and improve your efficiency and profitability?
So I think the main one is around kind of the manual processes, so the manual calculations, things like that, having to sort of have the lack of sort of automating that within the system. Quite often using like a desktop software, you end up having a little bit of corruption. You might end up having to make sure that someone else has finished with the file before you go into it. It just makes admin and actually the physical processing of payroll like just so much more time consuming. I think it's always hard, isn't it? Like when you've got more than one person processing something, to make sure that everyone knows where they are with it. I think that's probably one of the bigger sort of inefficiencies, I suppose, that we've sort of seen within my practice, but with our clients as well.
So the manual aspect, you don't know who's done what, and it's hard to track, almost hard to have an audit trail and see what needs doing and what's outstanding. Yeah, I get it. And repetition of tasks. And I think just generally any task that's not automated, then you need to have a manual intervention. There's always the risk that they don't get done, or you get 2 or 3 people doing them. So so the lack of automation and the sort of joined up approach is probably one. So on that note, Claire, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a follow-on from what Nikki said, really. I mean, I'm a payroll bureau, so I need to have multiple members of staff processing the payroll. And when it's all desktop-based, if that member of staff is off sick or anything, that causes a huge problem in trying to get those files into some central location for somebody else to deal with. The same if you have staff move on and things like that. So, but the other side of it as well is it's about sharing that data with. So as a bureau, I'm not just sharing the data and the reports to employers and employees, but I need to also share them with the accountancy practices. So having some sort of collaborative software for me as a payroll bureau was absolutely key.
So how did you, before we sort of moved into the cloud, how did you deal with those kind of issues? How did you manage that, some information? Because there'll be people on you obviously using desktop. What was the process, and then how has that changed?
So obviously the only option that we had before FreshPay was we were using desktop software. So it was very much a case of we had to kind of assign a group of our clients' payrolls to a certain member of staff and give them kind of the main file on their laptops. It caused us huge problems because, again, if somebody was off sick or if they left or if something happened to their laptop, you're kind of having to constantly back up and restore those files that they're using to a central location, so you've got them. But again, every time you access that payroll, you're having to then restore that file if somebody else is using it. Like Nikki mentioned, there's a huge risk of corruption. So we didn't manage it very well, if I'm honest. And you know, we had to download all the reports, we had to share them manually, you know, emailing them, password protected, and so it made it such a long, time-consuming process.
I think you touched on something there, but obviously members of staff being ill or on holiday, juggling workload is something that I know. I'm spoken to lots of accountants and payroll companies. That is the issue. And I think when speaking to lots of accountancy practices, often they'll have a very small team of payroll people, maybe one or two. So if one person is off or is ill or actually hands in a notice, that can cause a real logjam. That sort of lack of resiliency. I think that's something. And I think just before I come to you, Jenny, if anybody's got any sort of thoughts on that, any issues they've addressed that maybe we're not covering so far, it'd be good to get those thoughts out, or even if you echo the sentiments that are raised. But I think what we want to do is ideally today get as many of these inefficiencies out as we can. I think sharing information and team resilience is one that is definitely a problem. I'm not even going to go on to recruitment of people in payroll, because I think that's another huge issue. So and I'll be quiet now and I'll pass on to Jenny to add her thoughts.
Claire and Nikki have covered a lot of it. I mean, I would say email traffic as well is, you know, we can all get sucked into email traffic, right? In and out. And it makes everything so inefficient, because you get an email and you reply to it, and you get an email and you reply to it. And, you know, so that's one of the things that I think trying to get that eliminated. And we make a rule with our customers. We say, you send us, if you're sending us an email, you send us one email a month for your monthly payroll, right? If you send us multiple emails, we're not going to be able to track it because it gets so complicated. So I think that can be a huge inefficiency when you allow your customers to suck your time away. I think that, you know, making rules, and I think often they are happier as well when they've got a rule to follow. And following on from that, submitting information to you, you know, if you've got a template, like a timesheet template or you know, a template of salaries or bonuses or additions or whatever that they can provide to you, that's much easier than, you know, again, it's really highly inefficient if they send you, oh, you know, John's got a bonus this month and, you know, Annie's got a pay rise and what have you. And then you process all the payroll and you send it to them for approval. And then they come back and go, oh, I didn't tell you, oh, we've got a new starter. Or, you know, if you've got a template form for them to complete that they can do sort of during the month, or, you know, if they can add stuff on themselves through the software, new employees and things. I think that's a huge inefficiency is letting your customers do what they want to do instead of prescribing rules and saying this is how we work.
The back and forth, I think that the communication, I think is that the same for everybody? I think, and do the clients follow that rule? If that's one question I had, is obviously we look at it from an accounting perspective, asking for information records is often difficult. Do the clients generally follow that rule, Jay?
Generally, yeah. Yeah, you have, I think, as in with all accountancy and anything like that, you've got good clients. You've got clients that are your gold stars, and then you've got some that just, yeah.
Do you find, though, following on from that, Jenny, obviously, exactly like you said, email traffic's horrendous sometimes. But I think by setting expectations right from the beginning, so if you have a process, it's getting that process right from day one, so they've got less chance to fall into any bad habits and start sending multiple emails, because, yeah, it can very easily happen.
I think that's a good point, and setting it from the outset of the relationship with it. When you take on a client, we'll come on to some stuff about clients in a second, but you're setting out clearly, here's how we're going to run your payroll for you. Here's what we expect of you. Here's what you can expect of us. I think often what happens is you almost become custom and practice. And then if you've got, you know, 10, 20, 50 clients, you can have 10, 20, 50 different ways of working. And that is a nightmare, particularly going back to the staff issues. If someone's on holiday, they might have a client they run payroll for and they do things in a certain way. Well, actually, that's different to the way that the other person's clients are. That's going to cause inefficiency, and also it can cause a little bit of friction between client and the firm as well. So I think that client communications is always there's always scope for efficiency in those areas. I think just moving on from that. So I think we've covered a few efficiencies. I think it's basically information. It's communication, isn't it? Really sharing information and communication. If you can get that nailed, that's going to improve a lot of the efficiency, and also allocating the work internally to the right people is another thing that can help.
And I also think internal communication is really key, because I'm certainly in my business, my team are all really helpful people, right? We love helping people, and I think most payroll people love helping, and so it's making sure that they're aware of what they should and shouldn't be helping with as well, because we often, and I know we're not alone, we often get HR queries, right? And our team want to help, and quite often they'll go down a rabbit hole of trying to find the answer, and then they say to me, and I said, that's not payroll, right? We have to make sure that our clients' expectations are managed, and we say to them, we have to say that's not included in what we do for you. I'm really sorry, you know. And I think that's another, you know, you have to make sure the communication is as good internally as it is externally as well.
I think, and the scope of people's role is really important. I think, and going outside that can be a little bit risky at times as well, should we say. Next thing I want to move on to is pricing. And I think pricing is something across the whole payroll and accountancy world is something that it's changed quite a lot over the last 5-10 years. So tell us a bit about your sort of pricing strategies and what's worked for you and what hasn't worked, and where do you think this is going? Claire, I'll start with you for this one.
So I think in practice it's quite common for bureaus, payroll processors to charge per payslip, per employee. But I think what you've got to be careful of is, you know, that's quite a manual intervention, but you've got to make sure that your costs on the other side of that are in balance. So, you know, looking at software, most softwares will charge per employee, and you've just got to make sure that you've got that balance right so that you're managing your profit margins. And that's something that obviously we looked at when we created FreshPay. That's kind of the, and we you know, looking at things like, you know, what else can you charge for? So is there anything you can upsell? So you have a fixed cost maybe per employee, per pay slip. Is there anything else that you can charge on? So, you know, pension setups, new payroll scheme setup, those sorts of things. I'll let Jenny and Nikki follow on from that, but that's kind of where we start from, I think.
Okay. So in fact, Jenny, do you want to carry on, sort of give your thoughts on pricing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, personally for us, the way we work is we have a fixed baseline. So we start at, and we have a director only. We have director pay as well. You know, in my accountancy business, obviously, when you're just running a simple payroll. But for anybody who's got employees, we have a simple start line from up to five employees is a standard rate. We don't charge less than that because you've got all the faff with actually running the payroll. You can't charge, you know, £8 for running a one-person payroll because you've got all the other things that go with it. So, you know, we always start at 5 employees, up to 5. And I think most payroll bureaus will do a per employee charge. The way that we tend to do it, which might be different to most people, is we talk to our clients and see not how many employees they've got now, but how many they're going to be having over the next year. And we'll go, okay, so if they've got, say, 13 at the moment, but they're going to be growing to 20, we'll do a price somewhere between 13 and 20, and we'll say it's for up to 20. So in the first few months, they might have 13, 14, 15, and then they might go up to 20. So although we're not charging the same as we would for a 20 person, we're charging a bit more than a 13 person. And for me, that saves a huge amount of having to go and count the employees. Oh, yeah, you have to go to the software and pick out that number, but you have to do that when you're billing. And again, that's a little bit of an inefficiency. You know, they're all tied in with each other. So, and again, with our particular practice, we just make one fixed charge. We say it doesn't matter if you've got starters or leavers, or we include everything. So we include the declaration of compliance. But if you want to start, so we look quite expensive if you came to us for payroll, but actually when you tell the clients what's included, because they go, oh, I can go down the road and pay £5 a pay slip instead of £8, for example. And I go, yeah, but they might charge you for starters and leavers. They might charge you they might not do your declaration of compliance, right? Which you can't really, the companies can do it themselves, but I wouldn't trust them to do it.
That's actually we just had a question in. Actually, what is a reasonable rate per pay slip? And obviously, you mentioned you've got that kind of floor where it's going to be a minimum of 5 employees, which makes sense because there's a certain amount of admin that goes in. But in terms of a per pay slip rate or per employee rate, what? In fact, that's an interesting question. If it's per employee, you might have weekly pay or monthly pay. Do you do per slip or do you do per employee?
So that's interesting. So we don't do weekly payroll.
Okay.
we if somebody comes to us wanting weekly payroll, we say we're not the right people for you. We don't want to do that. So we only do monthly. So our per employee charge is not per. But that's something that you need to think about when you're pricing, right? Because again, some will do it per employee, some will do it per payslip, and it really depends on how many pay runs. You might have weekly, you might have fortnightly, you might have 4 weekly, which is even more complicated. And I mean, as I say, we charge around about £8 per employee. But I know there are bureaus that charge less than that, and I know there are bureaus that charge more as well. So I think we're it feels about right to me.
I think when we price in that, because obviously this is looking at one employee versus many, we start off more expensive per payslip at the beginning, and then we reduce that. So if they've got a number of employees, we've got some that have got 150 sort of employees, we don't charge £8 per payslip on those. And actually what we're more likely to do is have a conversation with our client, and although we don't charge on an hourly basis, we sort of have a think and we go, actually realistically it's probably fair on us and fair on our client if we charge it at X amount in total per month, because we know how long that's taking us to run. We quite often do charge for leavers and starters, but it all depends on the client that we're working with. So if we've got someone who will have a leaver once a year, then we do charge for that, because actually we probably managed to reduce our monthly fee for them. They're at the basic level. We're not kind of building that leavers and starters into that original price, so we're not recovering it. So then we would charge a leaver or a starter. If we had a much bigger company where actually we're getting at least one leaver every month, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that looks like, starters, leavers, we would then price that within that monthly fee. So if we would then say, right, on average we're going to have 2 starters, 2 leavers every month, and so our monthly price would include that as well. So then we wouldn't charge for a leaver and a starter in that situation. So we try to very much bespoke it to the type of client that we have. We're in a pretty decent position that we've had lots of different types of clients, so we kind of know when someone comes through the door what that pricing structure needs to look like. But yeah, and it's very easy to underprice payroll. I think a lot of companies say that it's a loss leader. It's something that you have to do because you're doing accountancy. And I don't think that should be the way that we price it, because actually it's a really valuable service. In fact, it's probably the most emotive service that we're going to give to any of our clients, because as soon as something goes wrong with payroll, you know about it and everybody knows about it, and it's got a bitter taste in the mouth for the employer, for our clients. The employee's not happy. So making sure that actually payroll is done correctly is probably one of the most important services that we can do for clients, and we shouldn't be undercharging it, because if we undercharge it, we don't have the time to be able to give that extra value and to make sure that everything is good for our clients. I
think that's so. We've obviously got to kind of you've got the sort of different packages. So we'll come on, Claire. It'd be good to get your thoughts, obviously from a bureau perspective as well. And Rachel's added that she does similar to you, Nicola, where she starts at 12.50 and then the pay slips go down as the employers get larger, because I suppose you can bundle of work. It's economies of scale, I suppose, at that point. Claire, it would be good to understand your sort of methodology as well, just so we can kind of discuss the three of them and come up with some options.
I mean, so I do charge per employee per pay run, because I do weekly, fortnightly, I do all of them. So I can't charge kind of a fixed cost, because some of my weekly payrolls are massive, basically. So we do charge kind of a more per employee price, but that is inclusive of everything. So in that we include the pension. Sorry, we charge for pension setup, but things like starters, leavers, we don't have any additional charges for that. So we're quite high per employee when you look at it over the course, but we don't charge for all of the extras that payroll comes with. Setups we do, pension and payroll setups and things like that. But apart from that, everything else is included. So all of the pension, auto-enrollment, tasks and everything, that's all included within our cost. But what's interesting to see is from talking, about this subject is it used to be very much a fluctuating cost or a per employee cost, but there's definitely a shift more to fixed pricing and having it more fixed, because I kind of think a lot of software is that way as well, so it's easier to manage when you've got fixed costs. You're not constantly fluctuating all of the time.
And do you charge, sorry, actually, I've just taken over a question now. Do you charge like 4 times, for a weekly payroll, would you charge 4 times as much as if you had that number on for monthly, or do you assume a few efficiencies and things? So we don't do weekly either. We only do monthly. Yeah, we charge per payroll because a lot of our weeklies are fluctuating. So, they're in hospitality trade, so they're time consuming payrolls and they've got a lot of employees on them. So absolutely, yeah, it's per employee per pay run. So yes, but we have that conversation again when we take on a client. Do you need to be weekly? Especially if it's a brand new payroll, do you need to be weekly? Can we move it to monthly? So we make sure that we kind of running it in the most efficient way. But for most of those that are on weekly, they need to be on weekly for the type of industry that they're in.
Can I ask Claire and Nikki a question? So when I take on a new client, I ask them about who their pension is with, and if they have any other pension schemes. So I've had clients in the past where I probably wasn't so wise to asking all these questions, where they've got personal pensions. So some employees have opted out of the auto enrollment and they have personal pensions, and the client is expecting us to manage that and let the pension companies know about how much to take by direct debit. So do you both do that as well? Check on that, and do you charge extra for extra pension schemes?
I've only just started doing it recently, since we had a conversation about it actually, because I hadn't really thought about it. My team that processes payroll kind of just gets on with it. So it wasn't until I thought about it and then had the conversation with them. Obviously, there are easier pensions to process, and even some of the standard auto enrollment pensions, some of them are more complicated, as in like you have to log in, they usually fail, you get an issue if you've got like a slight spelling on something, so having to fix stuff. So knowing which ones actually are just going to be straightforward, they're through, you don't have to think about them, and knowing which ones you have to key in, and especially if you've got personal pensions as well. So yes, it's now become a question that I ask, and I think that's off the back of a conversation that we had not that long ago, because I hadn't even crossed my mind.
Yeah, so for us as well, we obviously our pricing structure covers auto enrollment, so the things that go through the payroll, so your assessments and your processing of that payroll. And we do ask who they're using, because like exactly what you said, some of them are far easier to work with than others, but for personal pensions we would charge extra, because that is kind of something that's outside of payroll as such. You're not doing it within your payroll calculations, it's kind of usually separate, so we would charge extra for that.
I think what's interesting for me here, obviously spoken to the three of you have 3 different models, right? So 3 different firms, and if we look at, so Claire, from your perspective, you've taken the bureau approach. You do the weekly, presumably fortnightly, whatever pay runs people want to do, more flexible. Yeah. Whereas I think Nicola, Jenny, from your perspective, you're focused on the monthly payroll. So I think just take a step back before pricing. It's almost the package that you're offering. So if you've got monthly payroll and if you've got X number of employees, here's our offering. We'll wrap it all in. There's the certainty. And actually, Claire, from your perspective, you're probably dealing with a wider range of payroll. So you've probably got to have almost different packages and be a little bit more bespoke when you're dealing with a wider range of your payrolls.
Exactly that, they're kind of, some of the payrolls can be quite industry specific, how whatever industry they're in, it kind of changes how you would sort of deal with them. So yeah, exactly. Nikki mentioned it earlier, it's about a conversation, what do they need from their payroll? How often does it need to be? There's a lot of conversations that are had for us to determine what is the best way that we can process your payroll in the most cost effective way for both us and for them.
That's probably before you even get the pricing. It's okay. What do we want to offer? Which clients do we want to? What's our ideal client, right? And if you're working with clients that's sort of okay, this is the type of client we want in this sector. We can run monthly payrolls only. For example, Claire, you mentioned hospitality. You've got to be quite expert in that area to go because of the fact that you've got flexible workers, seasonal workers, all that kind of stuff that happens. I think that's the first step.
You have to know about trunk schemes and things for hospitals.
Well, trunk, yeah, exactly. All that the joys of trunk and all these kind of things with tips. And I'm not even going to go into construction because that's even another whole world.
Do construction, that's fine. I'm not touching the restaurant and I'm not touching hospitality. I'll do construction every day. That's not a problem. But I think that's it, isn't it? Like you choose your issues and you go down that route, and that's the clients you go down. So yeah, I think it very much is like you sort of make sure that you know what you want to offer out to somebody.
I was just going to say, just following on exactly from what you just said there, Nikki, it's very much like when you're an accountancy practice or a bookkeeping practice like we are, again, you choose your niche, where is your area of expertise, and you kind of tailor your services to suit that. It's kind of the same with the payroll. If your area of expertise is within a certain industry, like Jenny said, she only handles monthly payrolls because it fits in with the model of their business. You've got to do the same with your payroll. You've got to make sure that you're catering to where your expertise lies. So yeah, you tailor it.
I think I'm going to skip ahead. I think that comes to I'm going to skip a question because I think we're probably on the right topic now about client sort of retention and relationship building. And obviously, if you've identified a certain type of client that you're a good fit for, probably makes it easier to build a relationship with them because you've got a deeper knowledge of the I'm not going to sort of lead the witness, as they say, but in terms of relationship building, if you know that niche, we mentioned things like trunk. If you understand that, it's easier to develop that relationship. But what else do you guys do in terms of looking after your clients and trying to develop that relationship? How does that work in practice?
So I'll go with that one then. I think just making sure that you're delivering excellent customer service. Like as I said earlier on, like payroll is one of the most emotive subjects that you're going to have to services that you're going to have to provide to people. So they are always going to worry about it. It's always going to be stressful. Not just to mention from their point, the fact they've got to make payments to their employees, that's a big cash flow issue, all of those things, and kind of knowing everything early, but just communicating with your customers. And I think that goes across the board for the majority of services that we offer anyway, but just having that kind of responsiveness to customers, talking to them, doing that extra bit, making sure I just checked HMRC and I can see you didn't make your payment last month. Your new one's coming up in a week. You probably need to make both of them, otherwise you're going to start just little things like that, just to show, look, actually, do you know what? I am thinking about you. I am here. If you need me, I'm going to give you those little bits of extra kind of push. And I think that's what clients like. And it's easier, I think, for when you're running a practice doing more than just payroll, you talk to them on a regular basis anyway. And I suppose with Claire as a payroll bureau, when you're just doing payroll for someone, you probably only really talk to them at pay time to ask for their information. But I think just keeping them informed, keeping in touch with them, making them know that you're there and that you're available for questions is always good.
And I think I was just going to say, what helps with the customer service as well is the processes and the systems that you use. It's imperative. Like I mentioned, when I first started, I was using more of a manual software and having to download reports, email them this to this person, send them to this person, download a load of pay slips, all of that. It helps with the customer service when you've got really, really inefficient processes and systems, and people can log in and access information when they want it rather than when you're available to download it and email it. So that all helps with the customer service side of it as well, delivering that service.
I think communication and making it easier. And in terms of communication, it's a great question here from Natasha. how, and this is for all of you, we'll come back onto the retention, but I think trust is really important. And we mentioned how important payroll is, right? Because if people's employees don't get paid, it tends to cause issues. And I've seen that in from a software perspective in the past. How do you address more unscrupulous payroll companies who offer packages that are too good to be true? So if you've got someone coming into you for a quote and they come with another quote from another company, which you think there's no way they can deliver that service, how are you honest and upfront with that, or is that a red flag to kind of say to the client, okay, go with that company? Then how do you manage that?
I tell our clients when they come to us initially, we're not the cheapest out there. You will find much cheaper accountants or whatever out there. But if you want good service and you want to be assured that your returns are filed on time, that you're not going to be late, that you're not going to get interest and late penalty charges, if you want that and you want great service, then come to me. But if you're happy, if what drives you is the cost of the service, then we cannot match that sort of cost to give the service that we want, and that's how I approach it. And I have a little metaphor that I use, which is when you go to buy a car, do you go and say, I want to buy the cheapest car I can buy, or do you say, actually, I want a reliable 4-seater estate car that will get me around with my kids or whatever? Or do you say, actually, I want a bright red convertible sports car? And you go and look at what car you want and then price it. You don't look at the price and then find out the car you can get. And that's how I sort of word it to clients, right? If you want a red sports car, you're not going to get one for 250 quid from the bloke on the corner.
I think just this applies. I think this, what I'm going to say next, I think it applies whatever particularly in the service industry, right? If you've got someone approaching you for a service, I'm spoken to mates who've got different businesses. When they run Facebook ads, they get a lot of inquiries, but they tend to be very price sensitive inquiries. They tend to be, if you take those clients on, and obviously as people's businesses grow, you take on different clients when you start, possibly the ones you do when you've got a bit more choice and a bit more income coming in, right? That's just, that seems to be, particularly in accountancy, the clients you have in year one are probably not going to be the type of clients you're going to have in year 5, but they tend to be the more high problem ones. So people who have really focused on the price tend to want the service to creep as well and not pay any more for it. So it's almost a bit of a qualifying them from a sales perspective. For me, it almost qualifies people out because you're going to spend probably more time dealing with that client than a client who's a little bit more realistic and who appreciates you've got a business to run as well, right? So in terms of the unscrupulous payroll companies, we've seen there's been so many kind of scandals in the whole payroll umbrella kind of, you've got the employee loans and all this kind of all these things that have happened. I think you can point to that now as well and say, yeah, you can take the cheap option, but there's always a risk if you don't get it correct. The cost down the line, the fines, just the inconvenience you cause your employees. So I think you can deflect that a bit. But I also think if someone is, waving a sort of a quote saying this is much cheaper than you, I always think it's just easier to go, great, you go there.
I think the key message with those type of clients, Andrew, is if they're so transfixed on price, then they don't see the value in what you're offering. And so therefore, then they're not the right client for you. And I think that comes, accepting that comes with the longer you've been in practice. You kind of, when I understand it, in the early days, I was definitely the same. You'll say yes to everybody because you need the work in. But absolutely after time, you kind of realize exactly those become the most problematic clients because they are just so transfixed on what the cost is, or they see it as a cost, not an investment as well, but they just don't see the value in the service that you're providing.
I also think if you look at always look at the lifetime value of clients, right? Those clients tend to churn because if someone will undercut you by 50 pence next month or in 6 months' time, they go. So you never really end up, the lifetime value balances out. So I think there's a whole, I think being honest with clients is important. And I think just going back to the point about client retention and relationship building, I think that honesty and trust, when you're providing such an important service as payroll, and it's the same for accountancy, if you don't have good communication, because people often, my initial career was as a solicitor, and people tend to judge solicitors not by how good they are, their technical knowledge of the law, it's how quick do they answer the phone call, how quick do they get back to me, because actually that's what's important to people. They just assume you know how to do your job. They assume that you're technically proficient. it's the communication piece and the speed of response and the clarity of response that people welcome. So I think in terms of client management, I think communication is probably the most important, and trust. If you don't do the job well, obviously that's going to have a consequence. We've touched on it, and I knew, and we've got 3 real experts on this on this year in terms of automation and technology. Obviously, something we touched on at the outset. Payroll is can be a very commoditized process, can be very time consuming, lots of changes in payroll legislation. You guys have gone a step further in leveraging technology. You've built, you like the company so much, you bought it, so to speak. You've literally built your own product. Tell me a bit about how that came about, and what was the frustrations. I know we touched on it briefly, but how have you used that to drive forward your payroll businesses?
Well, I mean, Nikki, we'd all been looking for great cloud payroll software, and I think we trialed separately before we knew each other. We'd all trialed sort of all different types and just couldn't get on with it, couldn't find the right one. And then Nikki posted a thread on a Facebook group and said, any good cloud payroll software out there? And Claire went, nah, thinking about building my own. And I went, I actually am thinking about it. And we started it because we could see there was a need for it. Because I'd say every week somebody was posting a thread saying, is there any good payroll software out there?
And one of the most common questions, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's a true online business because we didn't even meet until we already put a lot of money and time and effort into it and started the development. We didn't even meet for about 6 months, did we? So true online business, yeah. And we could see the benefits of using cloud. I mean, they're immense. We've touched on it already, like the desktop, the corruption of files. I was having corruption of files. And basic things like downloading updates. If you've got an update, you've got to download it and apply, and it all takes time. Again, that's inefficiencies. The collaboration that Claire mentioned earlier, being able to share information easily with the employers and in Claire's case with the accountants. And in fact, Nikki was outsourcing her payroll at the time to a bureau. So she found it really frustrating that she couldn't view that information as the accountant. So, I'll stop now and let somebody else, because we could all go on for hours actually about it. But yes, so leveraging the technology has made a huge difference to us.
Yeah, and I think the reason we started this was basically to make our lives easier. So we've created a software that makes our lives simpler. So we want to be doing, and I think I touched on it earlier, the admin stuff of it needs to be done as easy as possible, because actually that's not where our value lies. Our value lies in the expertise. Our value lies in the kind of the talking to clients, the being with clients, the doing that type of bit. So actually, do you want to calculate a net pay, a bonus? Do you want to have to calculate how much your statutory maternity leave is, all of that sort of stuff? I think it's just bringing it all into one place and actually giving something that's easy enough, that does all of the sort of the automation, sends stuff off automatically to HMRC without you having to log back in again. Because that was one of the things we got really frustrated by, was that every time we wanted to do a payroll, especially if you're doing weekly payroll for however many clients, you've got to log in the system, send the RTI, send the pay slips, and then close it down and then open up another one. And then if you wanted to look at last year's, you've got to open up last year's file. And it just got frustrating. And then something crashes and you're like, I've lost everything. I was just working on something. And all of those things kind of just frustrated us so much that we needed to do something about it. So we built this payroll software to make our lives easier, but luckily also makes everyone else's lives easier as well, based on feedback. That wasn't quite the question, but I know about the whole technology thing. One of the things that popped into my head earlier on as we were talking about getting information from clients. How many of you have handwritten new starter forms when you can't see what the national insurance number is because you don't know if it's an F or a T because someone's written it in swirly writing? Honestly, that, just doing that online.
Type that in and the address is in and things like that, and they give you half an address, and yes, you can just utilize things like Google Forms or whatever, the Microsoft Forms or Drop Forms to get that information. That helps, right?
Repetition. It comes back to the point, and Claire, I'm sure you've got something to add to this, but for me, I think what technology and automation does is trying to avoid repetition of work. So I think that point there, when you have that, that smudged form that you can't read, you probably then going to make a phone call. You kind of just check what this number is. That's 10 minutes. By the time you look at the context switching aspect of it, you're replicating work. And yes, there's probably a bit more time needed to set up a Google form and monitor that. But if you multiple that across, 50, 60, 1,000, however many payrolls you've got, even 2 or 3 of those queries a day could be an hour of time, could be 2 hours of time, depending on you phone the customer. The customer goes, "Oh, I haven't got the hand. I need to ask." So, and you can end up with that. Come back to your point, Jenny, about the communication, the back and forth. Whereas you can get things. There's always room for error. People will always make mistakes, so they could just as easily key that in wrong to Google. But it's less likely you're going to go back and ask them, and they can see it. So I think at least then you get a bit more clarity. So I think that communication. I think that's one of the things the cloud does very well. And not just in payroll, but across it connects people a little easier, and it makes it easier to capture information and go through a process. I think I'm just going to add Claire, I promise I'll give you a second, because I'm conscious of time. But I think one of the things I see with software and across any type of software is cloud software won't solve all of your problems, right? Unless you've mapped out your processes first. And this is the point about, just to sort of recapping slightly what we've discussed. You've got to first of all decide, what's my target audience, right? What is my market? What type of clients am I going to work with? Okay, how do I map that workflow? How do I deliver that service? How much is it going to cost me? And Nick, you mentioned this. You don't want to be delivering a service for less than it's costing you. You want to make some money on it. How many steps is it going to take for me to do that? Okay, now we've got this cloud software. How do we put that workflow into that software? How do we expand that? And how do we maybe change that workflow because the software allows us to do something different? It's just taking that step back. And so often, and I think I'm guilty of this as well in my business, you start doing something and then you go, you just add, it becomes a Frankenstein's monster. You go, I'll buy this bit, so I'll do this, I'll do that. And then suddenly, after about 3 months, you go, I don't know why I'm spending all this money on software and I'm not using that because I'm using that now. And it does one thing. So I think taking that kind of high level and use horrible helicopter view and looking down and going, right, here's the cover clients, here's my workflow, here's the software, here's how I'm going to interact with clients. That's so important. And Claire, conscious we've come into the end of the webinar, so I want to get your thoughts on sort of automation and tech as well.
I think you've kind of summarised it really, really well there. It's about taking that step back and making sure it's there. And what's interesting in this whole cloud-based, space that we're talking about is what I found really interesting when we first started FreshPay is that there's so many cloud-based, accountancy softwares out there. Yeah. Payroll seemed to kind of be lagging behind, which is crazy. Like we said, it's one of the most important things in business. And that's what we found when we were looking for software. It was just lagging behind as far as being up to the, stepping up to the mark, which is, exactly why we looked at Build and FreshPay. But it's exactly like you said, it's about making sure that not just the processes that you're working through work in order for you to deliver that high class level of service that you need to in order to retain those clients. It's about making sure that the software can also help you deliver, because that sometimes can be what's sort of holding you back. You've got a great process in place, but if you haven't got the software that can deliver it in the way you want to deliver it, that's going to be holding you back. So yeah, it's looking at it all round from all angles. Probably for another day, but the other thing point I'd make is training. I think people with process and software, people and the number of times I've gone into an accountant more than a payroll company, if I'm being honest. You go to an accountant and the people that bought or implemented the software, maybe there may be 10 people that did that 10 years ago. 3 of them are left. The other 7, they're like, this doesn't do this. And you go, actually it does. It's just you've never had that training and that ongoing training. So I think it's important. And they end up fudging their process because they don't think the software can do something. So I think the one thing I would say in terms of efficiency is it's not just we've built an efficient process, we've bought this software, leave it. I think you've almost got to review it at least every 6 months, I would say, and try and spend a bit of time with the team to go, okay, almost that continuous improvement thing. What can we do better? What are the challenges we face?
what are the most common queries we're getting from our clients? How can we change things? So I think that continuous efficiency is, so many times you see these massive change projects, and it tends to be in bigger organizations. They're these huge change projects, they spend millions on it, and then 6 months later it's already out of date. So there's this big bang of change, but actually it's not the big change that makes the difference. It's the ongoing, the sort of incremental. I'm going to go down the marginal gains route now, which again, so many cliches coming out, but it is that continuous improvement.
So I think we could have a whole other webinar on how to choose and implement and maintain your software, because you know, I think that's a whole new webinar. Because
to be honest, one thing that was interesting, just having the three of you talk, this kind of forums where people can, and we've had quite a few questions. As you have this comment, you guys are hosting this with me, and you had some questions. What do you do about this? And actually sharing that best practice with other people. And I think one of the things that's nice about accounting and payroll is it's quite a collegiate environment. People will share knowledge, really, particularly when you get different. I know geography probably isn't as much of an issue anymore, but people are quite sort of willing to help and share. And I think if you can build that community, and that's, obviously you've got the sort of fresh pay base there, sharing that knowledge and building that community can be quite important. Conscious we've probably already overrun by a minute, and we've still got quite a few attendees on, and we've had some great questions. And Rachel, you were quite right. You've given loads of feedback there, which is fantastic. And we've had some questions. It'd be good to, if we've got any questions now, we've probably got a few minutes that we can try and address them. So if you can, I'll give it a minute or so to see if anybody wants to add anything into the Q&A box. And if not, feel free to email us afterwards. We'll send some follow-up. We'll send a copy of the recording anyway to everybody that's attended and anybody who's missed, with some contact details. And if you have any questions, maybe don't raise on the webinar, more than happy to try and deal with those outside. But if you've got anything now, fire away, and I'll give it sort of 30 seconds. And if nothing, we can enjoy the last sort of 14 minutes of our lunch breaks. We're going back to run lots of payrolls in many people's cases.
I wanted to talk, Andrew. I think one of the things we missed about was sort of upselling other services.
Okay.
And this is something, if I can just very quickly, I think one of the big things that we can upsell as payroll bureaus is payments of the payroll and to HMRC, because it's something that clients really actually hate doing. There's a few things. One is, especially if they're smaller, they won't have backs. So on their bank statements, each employee's pay will be shown. And they hate doing it because there's such a big risk they get it wrong. So, tools like, we use Teleroo, but there are other payment solutions out there. We happen to just love using Teleroo, and obviously FreshPay is integrated with Teleroo, where basically you make the payments and clients are happy to pay for it. So it's another service that you can offer to clients, which they're happy to pay for, which will increase your profitability. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think it was a really key thing actually towards the whole profitability piece that we missed today. Sorry.
And again, probably another webinar we can do. You mentioned HR consultancy, and we've had a question of Sam here. So Sam runs a very small practice with 5 payroll clients, and each of them are director payroll only. How much would I pay for such payroll on a monthly basis?
For FreshPay?
I was going to say, Sam, do you mean FreshPay?
If they're director only payroll, you could get our director only, up to 10 director only pays, which is just £10 a month. So I think amazing value. And also sorry, down onto the sales thing now. We're not here to sell, we're here to help, but we have an automated function on it. So you just tick it at the beginning of the year if they're on the same salary each month, and it will process everything automatically for you on the right day. So not only is it incredibly good value, it's hugely efficient. So there's myself.
Give us a pitch there. Sam did ask the price, so Sam will follow up with you on that as well. And we can probably set up another conversation. But it's 10 to, we've overrun by 4 minutes. We could have overrun by I think another couple of hours there, right? Because payroll is a huge area. I've really enjoyed that. Thank you for. I think we may have got one more question. Oh, thank you, Sam. You're very welcome, Sam. I think there's probably room for lots of these webinars, and evaluating software generally is I could spend 2 days talking about that, because the issue of people buying software that evaluating it is key, and things like training. But some really good insight. I think this is something we should definitely do again, and maybe expand on some of the topics. Upselling, cross-selling, that's on me. Jenny, I probably didn't spend, but we sort of we meandered through some of the other questions a bit more, but I think it was worthwhile in the end. As I say, I'll record it. Hang on, we got another. No, Rachel, thank you all. Love the fresh pay ladies. There we go. That's a positive way to end. So there we go. We'll echo Rachel's sentiments. Love the fresh pay ladies.
We love the fresh pay customers as well.
I'll send a copy. We'll send a copy of the recording out to everybody and anybody who's missed it. If anybody does have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And I think, hang on, there we go. Well, there's another anonymous question. Are you concerned that the big accountancy firms like Xero and QuickBooks could come in with cloud-based payroll? Then it would be a very competitive payroll monthly fee.
Can I answer this one?
Yes.
They already have cloud payroll software, and the only thing that seems to have happened at the moment is they put their prices up. So no, we're not worried, because we're really awesome payroll software that has been built by people who are using it on a day-to-day basis. And that makes such a difference. It genuinely does. Like, we're using it. We're getting feedback from our own teams who are processing payroll, and our clients do it as well. Like, we get feedback of things that are good, things that are bad, and we tweak it. And we're doing such amazing development at the moment that no, we're not worried about it.
I'm echo. I think expertise is important, right? Xero QuickBooks got great bookkeeping software. I think as you sort of creep away from that core bit of software, hard to maintain that passion about the topic that you engage with, because the core team tends to change. So I think there's two approaches in software, isn't there? There's the kind of suite approach where you buy all your products from one place, so there's sort of best of breed. Depends on what you want to do, but generally you don't tend to get both. Either you go for best of breed or suites. I think that's less of an issue now with APIs, because you can actually build a virtual suite using the APIs. So yeah. It's still about, pay your money, make your choice. I think that's a good point, Rachel. I'd agree with that. So no, Xero, and I went to XeroCon this year for the first time ever, because normally I'm working for a competitor, and there was all sorts of talk about going into practice management into this. It's big. It's a lot of work to take on, even with big pockets. Quite hard to sort of scale away. I think they've got great core products, but tends to be challenging. I think that personally. Hang on, we've got George here as well. Mid-year start to fresh pay from Moneysoft. Would you assist in setup, please?
We do have just get in touch with us, Georgia. We do have a migration package, or we can just help you. Either way. But get in touch with us, or we'll get in touch with you after today and talk to you about that.
Right. I am going to call it there. To give us some time. We will definitely be. My team will be in touch with a copy of this, and any questions, feel free, and we'll pass on any queries to the fresh pay ladies, to use Rachel's balance. And thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your days, and see you soon.
Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.